My talk's called Why Men, which is a question I've been asking for 12 years, simply failed to answer, which is why I'm leaving CVM in January. But we have got some statistics for you, which I'll show you. If I've got there's a clicker thing. There it is. Is it the right button, Adrian? There we go. Okay, so just to recap, we've had some of this already. 50% fewer men than women in the church. Statistics are ebb and flow, you know, and sometimes we put statistics up and people challenge them, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes people think statistics are amazing, and sometimes it upsets people. All I would say is that generally all the statistics we look at show there are less men than women in church, basically, and the decline is increasing, and that led me to, as a church leader for 10 years before I got into this particular line of work, led me to a conclusion of either the gospel's not true, or God loves women more than men, which is possible, or we're doing something wrong somewhere. So that was that one. This, Annabelle kind of touched on this earlier, 7.6 million people attending church regularly. That was TIFF on 2007. 2.6 million of these are men, so 1 man to every 2 women. 33 million Christians in the UK, apparently in 2011 census. 33 million Christians in the UK. I don't know if you believe that or not. That's when you chop the top of your finger off, you go to casualty, everyone says I'm CFV or I'm Catholic, you know, they still say that. 6 million people are apparently attending church regularly, which would be brilliant if you're a church leader, that'd be great, but 2.1 million of those are men. So that was another set of statistics, slightly different to the other ones, but just interesting. But these are the ones that grab me at the moment. This is kind of a bee in my bonnet. The total UK adult population, according to TIFF in 2007, was 3% upper class. But the church UK adult population was 22% upper class. That means we are really good at reaching posh people. But we're not very good at reaching people like me and my mates who come from Dagenham and Romford and the East End. You know, I clawed my way out, got a degree and got gentrified. But we're not very good at reaching these men and women. But since I'm thinking about men, particularly with my cap on, we're not good at reaching the white van man, the chav, these kind of people. We just don't reach them. In fact, I was in Clinton Cards a couple of years ago and I came across a card which has now been removed, which had a picture of a couple of people with shotguns, and they said there weren't any foxes to shoot, so we decided to shoot some chavs instead. Now, replace the word chav with black or child or homosexual and you'll probably be arrested. But there is a demonisation of the working class taking place. And to be honest with you, we are frightfully middle class as churches. So when I'm thinking about the whole men thing, actually there's a subplot which I'll come on to in a bit. The vast majority of men out there might not have degrees or be massively educated. They're ordinary blokes. They drink warm beer, they read tabloids. These are the fellas who we really need to reach and are failing to reach. And when it comes to marriages and relationship problems, often don't know how to express their emotions and feelings, so they resort to other avenues of expression as well, including violence against women and stuff like that. People often don't realise this truth about CVM, that actually there's a massive justice angle underneath what we're trying to do as well. This also is an interesting one for me. 10% of people in well-off areas go to church, but only 5.9% of people in deprived areas go to church, which I think is really significant. Just to let you know, I am actually going back to the board of CVM. My next role is going to be church planting and evangelism with Elim and directing that work. One of the things I'm really passionate about is trying to see some work going on in our inner city areas, particularly council estates. I started ministry in a council estate context, and this is where we saw massive violence against women issues, lots of alcohol-fueled violence, all kinds of stuff, and massive dislocation of relationships, marital breakdown, cohabitation wasn't working, children getting put into care. Big piece of work to do there. So there's some very serious statistics there, but just to liven up a little bit, I'm not going to go on that because of time. I'm going to try and recap some time for us. I don't know if you know who this is. I know that it's a bit blurry there, but any idea? It's not Gandalf, just to let you know. But any idea who that is? It's William Booth. We are in a Salvation Army course. I thought it would be entirely appropriate today for Aslan Wind Yorkie Bar. I thought it would be entirely appropriate today just to show a picture of William Booth. He was the man, wasn't he, who had a heart for justice and the poor. Did some famous speeches on that. He was the pioneer of the brass band, which was, let's face it, offensive music to the rich at the time, but beautiful music to the working classes. Now I find it offensive, full stop, but it was. Now if the Salvation Army were doing the equivalent now, they'd be doing drum and bass, I think. This is a sideline, we'll talk for another time. But that was William Booth. He had a massive heart for the poor. But there's a little known fact about William Booth. Did you know that in 1904, Ford released a Model B. No one had seen anything like it at all before. In fact, in 1904, there were only 12 Ford Model Bs in the whole world. William Booth, the man who had a heart for the poor, bought 4. 4 Ford Model Bs. The man who had a heart for the poor. He bought 4 Ford Model B cars at a cost today equivalent of over £250 million. For £50,000. For 50 million, that'd be amazing. £250,000. There's one reason why he did it, because he knew that if he got a Ford Model B and he had a convoy of them, and he stood in the back looking like a wizard, he knew that despite his weird appearance, and I've got a slight beard envy going on, he knew that if he stood in the back there, he would draw crowds of working class men. Because he knew that he needed to use all means possible to get the gospel to men. Because he knew that actually, despite everything we're saying here, in all the research, actually I believe fundamentally it's only the gospel, the message of Jesus Christ that makes a profound difference, a lasting difference. That's the transformative power that we believe in, isn't it? He knew he needed to get in front of men. And he drew crowds of hundreds of men. He went on a famous tour up and down the length of the country in Ford Model Bs, equivalent to £250,000 a day, which is why at CVM we're taking donations today for our Ferrari fund. Because the evangelism is important. So I'm going to just show you another little story here, which I think, there's a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about, but I won't talk about that now. I might have some time a little bit later. But I really wanted to get onto the heart of why we believe the gospel is important and how that makes a profound difference. We use all means possible. We don't have a Ford Model B budget or a Ferrari budget, but we do have a budget for curry, which is a new quiche in Christendom. So we do go up and down the country speaking of curry nights and Chinese nights, and all the old methods we find still work. Recently my wife, who is my PA still at the moment, she had booked me to go on a tour of the Netherlands where we were working and then come back and speak in a place called Barrow-on-Soar. I was a bit grumpy, to be honest with you, because I've been speaking all week, I've been away from home, and then she booked me to go straight back out to a place called Barrow-on-Soar. Has anyone been to Barrow-on-Soar? Why? It's kind of David, you can see away from the statistics. So, anyway, I was speaking a curry at Barrow-on-Soar, where there is a pub, there's a curry house, there's a canal, there's about 5 houses, and a cat. That's Barrow-on-Soar, and apparently 22 people were turning out on this curry night, and I was a little bit grumpy about that, if I'm honest with you. I've got a grumpy face anyway, and I was actually living the grumpy mood for real. Turned up, and I was there early, as I always am. The organiser was there, and I said, how many people are coming? And he said, 22. Great. Any non-Christians coming? And about 3 or 4. Fantastic. I said, what's on the menu? He said, chicken doner and a naan bread. I said, what do you don't like chicken doner? He said, you've got a naan bread. It's a good night. It's a great night. I said, how long do I want to speak for? He said, 15 minutes. Brilliant. 15 minutes. All this way to Barrow-on-Soar for 15 minutes in a chicken doner. Cut a long story short, sitting opposite the bloke, and he looked like Herman Munster. And he had a skinhead, not like a biological one, like some of you had a deliberate skinhead. And I just said hello to him, he completely blanked me, he was a bit intimidating. I stood up and gave a talk. I preached the message of Jesus Christ, very plain, very simple, no funny stories, and at time 15 minutes. Can't do an introduction in 15 minutes. Sat down again, said, what do you think of the talk? He just stared at me. So I kept up, finished with chicken boona, had a Diet Coke, went to the bar, got another Diet Coke. Bloke follows me and says, does your Jesus forgive anyone? Not Jesus, but does your Jesus forgive anyone? I said, what's he saying? He said, anyone. I went, yeah. He said, how the place do that, my dear man? Yeah, that's no effect. And I said, well, this is, I just explained the gospel. He said, can if you were a Nazi, for instance, you gassed you to death in a concentration camp? I said, of course you can. Explain it again. And he spun me to you and stormed out the curry house. He said, a curry house, with 22 people. My mate Gasky, who works with us at Seagram, his name's Paul Gasky, called him Gasky, he's an ex-counter-terrorism officer in the street. Staggering came bounding up to me, he goes, significant, very significant, absolutely significant. What's significant? He said he was a general in the neo-Nazi terrorist movement working across Europe. This guy. I thought, I wish he'd told me that before I got back in his face. He said he was arrested at gunpoint, planting a pipe on a gay rally. He's been convicted loads of times, been arrested loads of times for man violence. I thought, that's interesting. Cut a long story short, well, I actually said, what's he doing in Barrow-on-Soar? Apparently that's where the police house, safe house was until I exposed it in the talk. So it's no longer Barrow-on-Soar. But anyway, that's the point. We'll be good on national security issues. The next day I got a text message from Gasky that basically said he couldn't sleep all night. The next day he walked up to a church, in front of the church is open, he walks into the church, and he finds a Baptist minister sitting in a Baptist house, in his study in a Baptist church in Barrow-on-Soar. Baptist ministers in Barrow-on-Soar, I'd imagine, peaceful existence. All behind him, he hears Herman Munster saying, I heard about Jesus Christ last night. Is it true? So he turns around and sees this fellow on the left there, which you can just make out, standing there. A bit intimidating, I'd imagine. And thankfully, the Baptist minister was a proper one who knows Jesus and gave him the message of the gospel again. This guy drops on his knees and confesses his sins and gives his life to Jesus Christ. So profoundly transformed is he, that this year, 18 months after his conversion, he preached the gospel to 1,500 school kids on Holocaust Memorial Day. A Nazi terrorist, convicted terrorist, preaches the gospel to 1,500 kids on Holocaust Memorial Day. One of the first people he led to Christ was a man of Jewish faith. He also led someone who was gay to faith. He's led his son to faith. He's telling people he used to be in terror movements with about his faith. He has seen reconciliation sweep for his family like you wouldn't believe because of the message of Jesus Christ. That's actually why we do what we do. People think we're just into eating curry. Actually, there's another narrative that runs underneath it, which is so important. There's a lot of broken people out there who actually believe it's the message of Jesus that brings people back together. And we've seen some statistics there about faith uniting people in marriages and helping us overcome our differences and working those things through. That's why we do what we do, and that's why we think this is so important. And we can't quite make that out, but I'll just finish with this, because I want to finish quickly now, trying to pull about 5 minutes. You can't quite make that out, but we have one of our bases around the world is in Cambodia. In Cambodia, there's a terrible problem taking place called the sex industry. There was no sex industry in Cambodia, particularly until the Western aid agencies moved out there, sadly. For about 80p, you can get a Singapore Sling, which is a cocktail with everything in it. For about 80p, you can buy a girl and have sex. For 80p. There are now stag parties going out from this country to Phnom Penh on a regular basis, England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland. They're travelling out there in their masses because you can get absolutely hammered, and you can have loads of sex, including underage girls, for $10. And what that's happening is this: there are a lot of young men going out there, and their first sexual experiences are abnormal ones. And this is having a massive effect on society. Porn is making us have abnormal feelings about our sexuality. And that's breaking into our marriages, it's breaking into relationships. Just to give you an example of why we need innovative approaches to reach working class people and middle class people, sometimes you've just got to be a bit gritty. And sometimes you have to be a little bit confrontational. These guys, in the middle of a brothel mall, the ex-shopping mall, which is now stuffed with brothels, decided to do something very combatant. There's our guys out there. They decided that they would hire a unit and make it look better than the massage parlours, and they called it the message parlour. The idea being that when a guy is getting drunk at 1 o'clock in the morning, he doesn't notice that the A has become an E. And he staggers in there looking for a girl, but he gets a tub of Ben and Jerry's, and he gets a gospel instead. In fact, we were able to see a 14-year-old girl rescued last year from sexual violence, being raped by the CEO of a German aid agency. We were able to rescue her family through some of the work that we were doing out there. So just to say that there's, underneath this stuff, there's a very serious issue running underneath it. Violence against women. 2 women a week are killed in their homes by men. That's by men. Why men? More men commit violent crime. Why do we reach men? More men are in prison. More men are likely to be violent towards their children. Men are more likely to be sexually deviant. Men are more likely to die in wars. Boys currently are more likely to grow up with abnormal feelings about sex and relationships, which is why we need a very serious thought-through message on some of these issues, because actually I think the simple nature in men is causing an awful lot of trouble out there, but we see that the gospel is actually the thing that draws people back and sees healthy relationships established.